I've read dozens of articles that claim autistic women have a higher risk of experiencing sexual violence in their lifetime. This topic sparked interest for me as I recently interviewed a woman who was one of many who became victims to an accused serial predator in Phoenix, Arizona. This woman told me that she had been in a relationship with her abuser for 5 years, that he had stolen medical supplies, sexually and physically abused her, and threatened her life multiple times. She didn't know how to seek help because he isolated her from her friends and family. This, however, was not new to her because men had taken advantage of her since before she was out of diapers. The state of Arizona provided her with disability because she qualified as severely mentally ill. I then learned that her abuser used her social security number and benefits in a scam, leaving her owing $8,000 to the IRS. After conducting a small portion of this investigation, it left me wondering how many other women have been victims to abuse like this, and does autism and neurodivergence play a large role? In some of my other investigations, I found that a majority of the survivors that I interviewed suffered from conditions like epilepsy or self-described as neurodivergent. The victims who did not attributed their abuse to being young and naive with limited dating experience, which they believed left them vulnerable, and stated that the longevity of their relationships came from fear and isolation as well as trauma bonding. I wanted to open up a conversation with Tatum, a content creator who provides a haven for other autistic and neurodivergent people seeking answers and community. Let's hear what she has to say. To hear, kind of your background and you've been creating a really amazing space for neurodivergent people on your platform. And so that's something really awesome.
Thank you. First and foremost, I remember, when we connected earlier this year, I read that article and I wept. I wept because and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you out the gate, I'm extremely in touch with my emotions. So if I cry, I apologize in advance if I make you uncomfortable. It's just my nervous system regulating itself. I'm just letting it rip, but it's so familiar and frustrating to read words of someone who has been victimized by an abuser, and that those cries go unheard. That testimony goes unheard, and you try to see everything through in the correct way, above board, with a paper trail and such, and nothing fucking happens. That is just endlessly frustrating. It makes my bones ache. It infuriates me. And I have to acknowledge the important work that you're doing for so many people. You and your entire team, that is so badass. And we need more people like you in this world. We need more souls who give a shit about other people who are terrified to speak up, who are terrified to advocate for themselves, who feel like they don't have the space to do so. So before I even say anything about me, I want to take the time to thank you for all the important work that you're doing, because you're changing people's lives and you're helping reroute trajectories of people's lives so that they can start to heal and they can start, maybe taking a page out of your book and advocating for other people. And it's a movement that you're creating. So thank you for holding the space for people like us to speak up and speak out about our experiences. So I just wanted to say that first. I am autistic and I have ADHD. I knew neither of those things until I was 29 years old. So once that bell was rung, and we'll go into that a little more later, how I found that shit out. But once that bell was rung, I could not keep quiet about it because I knew that I wasn't the only one who had been suffering in silence for my entire life. So I just started talking about the shit that rattles around in my head rent free already, things that I thought were just me problems, but that can be explained by traits of neurodivergence. In my case, my neurodivergence being autism and ADHD. And that fostered so quickly an entire lost generations of people like us who fell through the cracks, who saw someone voice their innermost experiences that they had never said out loud. That's what got me to start talking too. The dust started to settle in my own life, and I started to actually sit with myself, and I used escapism a lot. I was on TikTok a lot, and that algorithm is so frighteningly accurate. It started giving me people who are neurodivergent, started describing things that I thought was just a Tatum problem, TM symbol, but we're putting terms to it, such as sensory overload and executive dysfunction and ADHD. And I'm like, wait a minute. ADHD. Like the mental image I had of ADHD was a little 8-year-old boy bouncing off the walls, right? Like hopped up on sugar. Like, yeah, like an extremely antiquated, outdated, incomplete trope, essentially. So the more I began to learn about ADHD, how it presents itself in women, how women are socially conditioned to mask their traits, to be not only the most mature person in the room, but to also look after the boys, because boys will be boys, right? It's the girl's job to be partner and parent to these fucking kids. So like that conditioned me to a lifetime of holding it in, a lifetime of hiding my true self, a lifetime of not being safe to be my true self. And once I started letting that out, more people started coming to me in droves. The numbers scare me to death. I don't like to talk about them. I don't like to think about them. I just like to think that it's just like a beacon in the sky, like, hey, are you also weird and different and have been told to be anyone but you your whole life? Right this way, please. Like, I want to foster a community where people can show up as their authentic selves and exist as their authentic selves without any expectations. Like when I host my live streams, I don't expect anybody to interact because I myself am super, super shy. Like, you know, when I watch streams, I like to lurk. I don't like to put myself out there that much. I very much only like to be perceived on my terms. Like, don't talk to me. But I have been able to meet so many people with similar stories as mine. So many people who tell me, wow, your experience is like word for word what I went through. And finding that camaraderie for the first time in my own life, because I'm being myself instead of what I thought people wanted me to be, has been so relieving and validating. And the truest connections that I've made with people and being my authentic self are more important to me than the first 29 years that I struggled with being liked and being seen and being validated and trying to mold myself into what I thought my surroundings expected of me, in order to survive in some situations, in some abusive relationships, and, you know, in my own home of neglect and abuse of various forms. It didn't lend me to a life of authenticity. I've had to manually override all of this shit and just become acquainted with myself and learn who I am. And I had to peel layers down to my nucleus to do so. And it's so painful to rebuild like sand grain by sand grain, but it's so worth it. And it's a process that's still far from over. And people who are in different parts of that process feel comfortable sharing that with me in whatever capacity. And it makes me so mad when I think about it, like all the times, all the years that I've spent trying to twist myself to be liked never worked. It never worked. But when I stopped, when I put down people's expectations of me, that's when it started happening organically. And that's maddening in and of itself, to think that all the energy I expended, it wasn't for nothing, because I survived, but like barely, you know?
So I want to move into, I've done some reading online, and I kind of want to move into, you know, how autism and like being neurodivergent kind of plays into becoming an easy target for predators. There's a few articles that I've read, and I just briefly, you know, want to tell you a little bit about like what I've seen here. There's like a lot of case studies that I've read, you know, on frontiers, whatever.org, frontier, words are hard, frontierin.org. This one is saying that 9 out of 10 autistic women have been abused in their lifetimes. On BBC News, there's an article here that says, you know, what's this say? I was sexually abused like so many autistic women. And this, you know, it's a whole article where they interview an autistic woman talking about, you know, why didn't she speak up, and, you know, what kind of kept her from doing that. There's just so much. Autism.org, you know, sexual victimization and autism. You know, there's a lot of articles covering this. And so, you know, the reason that like I came to this is because I read dozens of these articles claiming that autistic women have a higher risk of becoming victims of sexual violence in their lifetimes. And like this topic sparked interest in me because in one of my recent investigations, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, interviewing a woman who is autistic and recognized by the state of Arizona as, she said, severely mentally ill.
Sure.
And so she was on disability, and she was in a 5-year relationship with this guy. And he's a serial predator. I've spoken to a lot of other women. This guy, I'm posting about him right now on my page, Eddie Ellis, is his name. He's a DJ, has 6 kids, has felonies for forgery, which he used his autistic girlfriend's social security number to scam the IRS. And so so then, there's this whole situation going on. Okay, so she told me she had been in a relationship with the abuser for 5 years, and he had stolen from her, sold medical supplies belonging to her, and sexually and physically abused her and threatened her life multiple times, but that she became isolated from friends and family and had a hard time deciphering abuse from what she felt was deserved. She also told me that according to the state of Arizona, she was considered severely mentally ill and therefore was on disability. She also stated that the abuser used her benefits and social security number in an IRS scam, leaving her owing $8,000 to the IRS.
Oh my God.
After conducting a small portion of this investigation, it left me wondering how many other women have been victims to abuse like this, and does autism and neurodivergence play a large factor in the vulnerability of these victims? Now, after reading that, I want to know, do you believe that autism and neurodivergence plays a large role in abuse?
I think it definitely can, especially with women, especially with unrealized autistic women. But growing up in a physically, verbally abusive environment meant that was what was familiar to me. But even undiscovered autistic girls who don't have that abusive environment at home, society is not built for neurodivergent people, period. Disabled people, period. It teaches you that your needs don't matter. It teaches you to put yourself last. It teaches you that what other people want is more important than what you want. So I was turned into a people pleaser by the mixture of my environment and my upraising. But a lot of people are turned into a facet of that or a portion of that because of their environment. They disregard their boundaries. And for me, I found relationships that mirrored that because it was what was familiar, and peace felt foreign to me, and it felt scary to me to have nothing looming, to have nothing going on, nothing coming down the pipeline at me or whatever. I was born and raised in Southern Appalachia. Mental health is all but a myth around these parts. So I can't say for sure that I wouldn't have been put into some form of conversion therapy, such as ABA therapy. But my environment in and of itself was a form of conversion therapy by way of being physically punished for not meeting the expectations of the adults around me, being parentified to take on adult-sized problems as a kid. All of this factored into my cumulative 11 years of abuse at the hands of various romantic partners. But just looking back on all my old relationships, being, shown and explicitly told that my time is not important, that my needs are not important, that what I like is stupid, that how I look is stupid, how I talk is wrong, how I dress is wrong. I don't get to say no to sex because I'm your girlfriend or whatever. And putting up with that shit because I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different. And I can't say that my story is the exact same as everybody else's, but there's just so many similarities that I keep hearing that keep coming up. And it has a lot to do with that, a lot to do with being taught explicitly or otherwise that our needs do not matter.
Do you think that because sometimes, well, I know that you said masking is a big thing, right? Masking and kind of acting, like the most mature person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's hard to pick up on signs of an abuser, like a person who maybe is love bombing, or somebody that you're not understanding that they're love bombing because you don't pick up things the same way as someone who's maybe not neurodivergent?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to word that question, but there's a question there.
That's okay. That's okay. I think I see what you're trying to ask in that, like, does neurodivergence have anything to do with just being plainly unable to see the signs of abuse early on? Mine definitely did, paired with my dopamine deficiency. Getting any affection, I mean, there's so many like stigmatizing terms for it, like pick me girl and shit, like, but that was me because my environment never chose me. I was never chosen. Like, I always stuck out for the wrong reasons. So like love bombing was like all of my partner's MO looking back on it. But I don't know. I mean, my neurodivergence personally, anecdotally, definitely played into not being able to read the room, not being able to take the temperature.
What
Yes.
I do is like reading like body language and like kind of, where it's difficult to kind of read between the lines a little bit.
Yes. That's a big one for me. I take shit literally until I don't. Like an innocuous example of this is like someone will tell a joke and then I'll tag on to that joke and then they'll think that I don't understand what they're saying. And then they'll have to explain, oh, I was joking. And then I have to explain, I know I was tagging on to your joke. And then the opposite is true. Like just so many little missteps and misinterpretations that happen innocuously. But that definitely plays into sustained abusive relationships as well. Just getting it wrong, not like on a personal level, but like objectively getting it wrong, guessing incorrectly.
What does innocuous mean?
Oh, it means like innocent, like not nothing like sinister. It's like the opposite of sinister, I guess. Like innocent, surface level.
Okay, got it. Yeah. I feel like my brain chemistry kind of is like a little bit.
I get you. Felt. I'm weaning off my 80/80 meds, so when I tell you I'm fighting for my life, I am fighting for my life.
Sometimes I'm like in the middle of a conversation and completely forget like what is the purpose of this conversation. So now I'm trying to like reel my brain back around. I'm like, okay, what are the questions that I'm asking?
Yeah, no, you are fine. We're one and the same in that regard.
I think that's why I get some anxiety too talking about these topics because I'm like, am I gonna come off as like not professional or I don't know, just because my brain this thing.
And personally, I don't even give a shit about that. Like I'm in my living room. I don't even have shoes on. Like it's whatever,
Yeah.
Who gives a shit?
True. I think that's just conditioned of me, like, if I'm going into this space, like I have to be this like professional,
totally,
I don't know, entity or something when like really you're just talking to me. Like I'm not masking with you.
Yeah.
And I do mask too, even though I don't have autism. I do mask and I've been conditioned to mask like since I was young because I wanted to make everyone else around me more comfortable.
Yes.
So my own emotions, right? If I'm uncomfortable, like I can't let them know I'm uncomfortable because I don't want them to be uncomfortable.
Yes. God, it's a vicious cycle.
What are signs to look out for that will alert you that that your neurodivergent friend or loved one is being abused? So this is kind of coming from like outside perspective, right? How can we protect the people close to us that are neurodivergent and what signs to look out for?
Yeah. In order for me to answer this question, I have to sort of put myself back into these situations where like, I wish someone had seen this. I wish someone had recognized this in my life that I was suffering, because when you're in it, it's so difficult to even see that you're in it, much less reach out for help. But like a big sign that I would say, not across the board, but just like in general, something to like kind of perk your ears up at, kind of be like, are they okay? Did they just all of a sudden stop talking to you? Like, is their partner isolating them from people who they care about the most, their friends, their family, whoever that might be? Also, like, if you're trying to make plans with that person and they say, well, let me ask partner first. Not in a way like, I respect them, we respect each other mutually, let's run it by each other before I take a 3-day weekend. You know what I mean? It's more like, let me ask them for permission to be a human being in any capacity that doesn't have to do with them. That's a big one.
And would you also say, like, just to segue just a little bit, would you say that, routine is a big part of like an autistic person's everyday life?
Yes,
If a
yes.
like maybe if a routine is disruptive and something is different, maybe that's a sign to look out for.
It could potentially be like, I again don't want to put like a generally speaking stamp, because like, because looking at my own life from an outside perspective, even though I'm in a perfectly healthy relationship, like I'm a recluse. Like I do not want to be perceived if it's not on my terms. But like that's not the same for everybody. Like it's, man, words are escaping me right now too. I say all the time my brain is made of Swiss cheese and the floor is a trapdoor and everything just falls through. So like the isolation is a big thing. The asking partners for permission is a big thing. The like overuse, I would say, of like self-deprecating language is a thing, especially if before they met that person, they didn't really talk like that about themselves. Like if you notice that your friend just self-deprecates for self-deprecation's sake when talking about something, or like when they're trying to voice an opinion and they say, "Oh, well, I'm just a stupid bitch. It's whatever." It's like, "Wait a minute. What? No, you're not." Like,
Right.
where is this language coming from?
Yeah.
Yeah, like who made you feel that way? Just do a mental check-in on your friend, kind of ask them how things are going,
I
but it
know it
wasn't.
can be different for everyone too.
It
So
totally is.
it's not like these are the exact signs to look out for in every situation, you know, it's kind of just it's a really tough one. But you would say just like check in on your friend and really like see, you know, self-deprecating language,
Yeah.
change the routine that maybe like it wasn't something before they met the person.
Mhm. Another big one that I'm speaking of personally for me is my last relationship. I was sort of robbed of my identity because my identity, like showing up as Tatum, was not the correct answer. So I started to change everything about myself. What music I listened to, what entertainment I watched. You know, my drinking habits got much, 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 much worse. But a big one was how I dressed, because like when you're in an abusive situation, like we're hardwired to adapt or die, right? Like I had to essentially become a chameleon in order to survive my day-to-day existence with this sick motherfucker, right? Like I started to dress like him so that he would get off my case about having the audacity to express myself with like a cute blouse or something. Like if if you see like from the bottom up a person's entire personality change when they're with a new partner, that's something to look out for, I think. Not to be like a guarantee that person's being abused, but like it's like, is that person, is are they changing their appearance that vastly because they're finally at ease with who they are and this is the comfort that they're falling into, or are they dressed exactly alike? And in my case, that's exactly what it was. Like the t-shirt with the button up and the Vans and like I mean, it was comfortable, but like it wasn't me.
I know that's a tough, like loaded question.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. And what would you say, like, what's the best way to support you? Like, how would you address it in a way that's not like accusatory or like, oh, you know, like how do you address something like that? Like when you see those signs and you check in and maybe they give you an answer and they say, yeah, you know, like this is happening or whatever. Like how do you best support that person? You know, like are we going down to the police station right now because there's bruises on you? Like, you know, what's the best way to be a support for somebody?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, like we keep saying, every situation is different. So you have to assess the risk of that person coming forward, their immediate risk. Are they in immediate danger of physical harm for speaking out about this? It's important to hold space for that person if they come out and tell you, like, they slapped me, or they didn't stop when I told them no, or they like humiliated me in public, like verbally, or if someone has the trust in you as a fellow human being to confide in you with something like that, do not take it lightly, because I I mean it could literally be the difference between life and death in some severe cases. And holding space for that conversation to be had, even if you're uncomfortable, like try to be as strong as you possibly can for that person, because as uncomfortable as hearing it might be for you, imagine the hell that person is going through, and imagine the fear and the pride that they've had to put aside to come to the realization that they're being abused and to verbalize it out loud, it makes it real. To type it out and send it in a way that makes it real. It's not just a thought. It's not like, well, he didn't slap me that hard. Like, making excuses in your mind is different than explicitly telling someone. So hold space for them. Offer them physical space. Like, do you need me to come get you? Would you like to come over? Do you want to meet at a park, go for a walk, somewhere where y'all can talk that's not, because as we know, a paper trail can be dangerous. Using texts can be dangerous, especially if your partner is abusive and like won't let you have your own account, like has access to your passwords. Like, it's important to hold space for that person without putting them in danger, and being physically with them in the daytime in public. If your partner is particularly abusive and isolating, try to be at such a neutral place where nothing could possibly happen bad in that partner's eyes, right? Like a park or a cafe or something, and talk to them and ask that person what they need. Because I will admit, I'm such a, where is he? Name, number, address now. I'll pull the fuck up and I'll do something about it. But chill out, Tatum. It's not always that simple, right? Like, ask that person what they need. If they literally need you to just be there and listen, then be that. Like, you can be fuming inside, of course, because you care about that person. Why wouldn't you be upset for them? But don't try to offer solutions if that's not what they're ready for yet. If they're looking for solutions, they say, I don't know what to do. Then you can be like, okay, well, let's document these bruises. If they're laying their hands on you, take a picture of what you're experiencing. Try to record it if you can. There's like secret apps where you can hide this stuff. I know of the calculator, secret calculator app where you can hide if you're documenting evidence of abuse, you can hide it in that. I'm sure there's more out there than just that, but like, be prepared to take that trip down to the police station if need be.
I'm like an action person. And I think over the course of the last like 2.5, 3 years that I've worked with, over 30, survivors, victims, I've had to understand that not everyone is an action person, and that a lot of people have experienced such severe trauma that even coming to me in the first place and saying, that for them is like, I've said my piece. I got it out there, and like that's what they need. And there's others that want to take it further, and they want to press charges, but they're scared, or so you have to do everything like on the survivor's terms. You cannot force anyone to do anything, like regardless of okay, we want to hold this guy accountable, we want to do this, but that's not to everybody's like capabilities. What are the signs for a neurodivergent person to look out for in a person that may be taking advantage of them?
This is something that I'm still learning for myself and recovering, my codependency from growing up and learning how to enact boundaries for the first time and undoing literal decades of people-pleasing tendencies. I mean, now my boundaries are stronger than ever, and I'm able to quickly see if someone is using me for any sort of purpose. Like, if someone asks you to do something, and this doesn't even have to be a romantic partner thing, this could be like any human being, asks you to do something that makes you uncomfortable, and you say no. No is a complete sentence, period. And I know all the people pleasers out there, it makes your bones shudder to even think about saying the word no to someone because of the discomfort of that person. But it's so important that you do not absorb the discomfort of another person when you voice your boundaries, because boundaries are for you. They're what you're willing to put up with, what you're willing to accept. And if a person in your life that's already been in your life responds poorly to your boundaries, whatever those might be, then that is a good indicator that they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries for whatever reason. because anybody who loves you for you and accepts you for you and accepts your humanness and your limits will understand why you're setting that boundary. Will take your humanness into account, your comfort, your energy, your, you know, in my case, disability. Like, if someone is just hounding you for shit, I mean, that's sort of a blatant example, but just like anybody who tries to talk you out of your comfort zone in a way that's objectively like, no, I don't want to do this. And this isn't me not wanting to put myself out there. Like, I do not want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That answer has to be enough. And that's a big, big, big sign. And that's not even exclusive to neurodivergent people. That's anybody who struggles with boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And another big one, I had it. It escaped. I'm trying to retrieve it. I'm chasing it around the block right now.
I have something to add if you want me to.
Please. Yes, absolutely.
Coming up with that. I saw another creator on TikTok. I don't remember what her name was, but she mentioned that a test that you can do to see if somebody like truly respects your boundaries or respects you or has the right intentions is planting sort of like the way that she said there was this guy that I was seeing and I wasn't sure, you know, what his intentions were or like if I wanted to pursue this farther. And so I kind of planted this little thing. I told him, you know, like I really hate my middle name. Like I cannot stand my middle name. Like, you know, I never want anyone to call me my middle name, which wasn't true for her, but it was something that she sort of planted to see how is this person going to respect those boundaries, right? There's no need to call her by her middle name or include it with her first name, you know, like that was never something that she did before. So he would have to go out of his way to do that in knowing that it was a boundary of hers that he would be crossing. And sure enough, this person within a week, she said, started to cross that boundary and call her by her middle name. And so that's how she was able to kind of figure out like if this person's willing to go out of their way to do something that makes me uncomfortable or that they think is going to make me uncomfortable, what can they do in the future, you know, with something that will actually make me uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so yeah, after seeing that I was like, that is really smart, you know. So
that is so smart. And I'm just thinking of all my shitbag exes that would point and laugh and call me my middle name just to see the reaction out of me. You're not a bad person for having been taken advantage of. You're not stupid. You're not dumb. You're not even wrong, because you're just trying to exist. And there are plenty of actors out there in bad faith who want to get a rise out of you. And that's a really, really smart way to see if someone just like respects you as a human being. That's such an innocuous example that if they cross, like you said, what else are they willing to disregard? What other lines are they willing to cross?
One thing for me I realized is kind of along the lines of what that creator was saying. Sorry, there's dog hair flying everywhere. Is like I tell people like when I'm gluten free, right? Because I'm gluten intolerant. I really shouldn't eat gluten. Sometimes I cheat and it's a bad time.
I feel you.
but I will tell like somebody new that, you know, I'm gluten intolerant. If they suggest a restaurant that has no options on the menu, it's because they haven't thought about that and they're like not thinking about, okay, what, you know, like ulterior, you know, I want to make this a good experience for this person. If that's not even like in their mind at all, it's sort of a red flag. You know,
is a red flag.
If we're going to, if they pick out an Italian restaurant where, you know, there's pasta, there's pizza, there's no gluten-free options, you know, this is, you know, and they're not thinking anything about that, even though that's been a conversation, I would say that is probably a red flag.
Definitely a red flag. And I have an extreme example on the other end of that. In my previous relationship, I was having such tremendous stomach problems. A lot of it retrospectively had to do with me having an abled amount of expectations on my disabled existence, right? A lot of that had to deal with being abused every single day. But I was doing like trial and error to see like, is it a gluten thing? Is it a dairy thing? So like I went gluten-free for a little while during my last relationship. And I told my partner at the time that I was going gluten-free because I felt like I was sensitive to it. Because, you know, I would go gluten-free for a month and then I would like have a piece of pizza or something and then my stomach would get upset. And I was like, well, you know, it might make me feel better. But he took it to the nth degree. He would literally like order gluten, and I would have to, eat not gluten. And he would like give me a pinch of bread, or he would like let me have a sip of his beer or something. But then if I had too much of that or too much of a beer sip, he would smack it out of my hand. And he used it as a way to control my food intake, control what I ate, control what I drank. And I didn't even bring it up. Like when we go to a new restaurant or at a group of friends, like, oh, she's gluten free. Don't give her any of that. Like he was like speaking for me. Ultimately, I'm not gluten intolerant or anything. I just have IBS. So, yeah, hotties with IBS, shout out. But like my environment had a lot to do with that. But just, I had to voice that as an example just to really showcase the shitbaggery that I used to put up with.
Yeah, that's not care at all. Like it is under the mask of like, oh, I care about you, so I'm gonna smack this thing out of your hand.
It's control.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's control.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It's like if someone's willing to disrespect any type of boundary that you put up, whether it's, oh, I don't drink soy milk, or I don't, and they're like not thinking about it, anything. It's just like the minute little things. It's gonna grow and grow and get bigger and worse.
Yes.
As
Yes.
it continues. So that's something to look out for. And I don't know if you feel not qualified necessarily, but to speak on like nonverbal adults. But this is just a question that I put in here because there's a difference, right? You said the level of needs.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work as a PCA at a group home for developmentally disabled adults. The individuals under my care were mostly nonverbal, and I often wondered how they would alert me if they were being abused. What are signs to look out for when a nonverbal person is attempting to communicate abuse? And I kind of came up with, maybe body language or a change in behavior potentially. But I didn't finish that thought thoroughly before I put it down.
Yeah. My experience with that is extremely, extremely limited, but I think that you're definitely in the right track on the change of behavior. Like for an autistic person, generally like my routines are like basically sacred to me. Like it's because I have control over them in a way where I can expect the emotional bandwidth that I'll need to exist at in order to get that routine done. Like if something deviates from that routine, it can set me into overload. It can dysregulate my emotions. Like that's why routines are important for me specifically. But for someone who's limited verbal or nonverbal, that doesn't mean that their routines aren't important to them as well. That doesn't mean that, like I said, they don't have a voice. It's in their mind. Like their existence is just as complex. Whether or not they can voice it out loud has nothing to do with the validity of their existence as a human. Like you've worked closely with these people, like you definitely understand that. So while my experience and my qualifications are extremely limited, that's a really important one. Any change in like habit or routine, eating and drinking habits, like if I'm stressed, the first thing that goes is like my ability to eat. Like I can't, like if I'm anxious, my stomach is killing me, or I can't really even drink water because it'll just feel too heavy. Like pay attention for like basic changes in habits that normally wouldn't, like the boat wouldn't be rocked at all. I wish that I had more qualifications to speak further on that, but that is an important one to look out for, I'll say.
Okay, I do remember like there was one situation when I was working at the group home where there was this woman who needed assistance with showering, and I used to help her. I would stay there in 24 to 48 hour shifts, and she always had like the best time in the shower. She would sing, she would dance, she had like and everything. And I remember there had been like a different staff member who, was tasked with giving her a shower or just like taking care of the home, and they were like new to the environment. And they had like kind of control over the home, and I wasn't there for a few days. I came back and, I performed like the assistant's task with the shower, and she was crying in the shower. And like that changed for me. I was like, okay, so, what's going on here? Is this like kind of nonverbal communication that like, I'm uncomfortable now because this is bringing a memory back of something that might have happened. I don't know.
Yes.
I have no idea, but I feel like that, for anybody like working closely with individuals like that, or even just friends and family members, like maybe something that like used to bring a lot of joy, or, something like innocent.
Yes.
Like emotionally like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, anything like that was the exact thought I had. Like anything that brings them joy, if they no longer do that, if they no longer participate in that, or if they're, lethargic or seem, indifferent or apathetic to stuff that they used to love and like cherish, that's definitely something to look out for. Dead on with that. Yeah.
I was never able to prove anything. I was probably 19, 20 when I worked at this place, but like that made my hackles go up, and I was just
Yeah.
because this is widespread, and a lot of
Yes.
people who cannot speak up physically, cannot speak up for themselves, tend to be victims as well in these settings.
Yeah.
Because perpetrators get away and they're not held accountable. Yeah, it just makes me completely fume. It's super triggering to talk about. I'm sorry, but
Me too. No, hey, no, please don't be sorry. It's these people gravitate toward occupations that surround themselves with vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm.
Nursing homes, elderly care, schools, churches, daycare, anything like that, where if the person is trying to speak out against what they're going through, they won't be believed because of vulnerability X, Y, or Z, whatever that might be. And that's just so fucked up. And it makes me fume as well. It makes me fume.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I know that was a really...
No, please don't be sorry. This is important to talk about.
It is. It's really important, and it's just...
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't have any other questions written down.
That's okay.
But, yeah, like I'm really grateful that you had time to fit me in today to talk to you. I'm glad you're feeling better from yesterday as well.
Yes, oh my God. I was out of my antihistamine and I sneezed for 3 straight hours and couldn't breathe. And I have asthma and I was like, I can't even fucking sleep right now. So my brain was scrambled all day yesterday. So I'm glad that nothing, as scrambled as I am right now, it was much worse yesterday. So thank you for, your flexibility and accommodation. And it was so nice to talk to you about this, and much more articulate in writing as well. So like,
I'm like,
yes.
I go to in person. I have verbal dyslexia as well,
Wow,
so
yeah.
I'll say things backwards.
Yes.
Just be like stumbling over my words. So I'm like, okay, if I write everything out, then I can look at it and I'm reading. But I'm reading then, and then it's like, oh, okay, she's reading.
Yeah,
but
the struggle is real. I get it.
It is real, but I think like the main thing for me is to have these conversations, put them on social media if you're comfortable with it.
Of course.
So that we are breaking the stigma about talking about it, and like, hey, we're out here, we're talking about it. We want to create a safe space for people, to find their voices and share that. And even if you're just silently listening and not, interacting or messaging, just knowing that like there's other people that are experiencing this and you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the conversations that you're willing to have, the tough conversations, the traumatizing conversations, the triggering conversations, because working through that discomfort, there's such profound healing and like closure that can be found on the other side of that. But it's getting through the muck and getting through that shit that like cuts to the bone. That's the hard part that turns a lot of people away from this process. But thank you for holding the space for these important conversations to happen.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be doing it. It fulfills me. It makes me, excited.
I'm so glad. It's important work that you're doing, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you, and you as well.
Thank you.